Muchas gracias por tener el interés de venir y compartir con nosotros. Este encuentro busca no solo intercambiar experiencias, sino generar recomendaciones concretas, identificar buenas prácticas y construir nuevas alianzas. Al finalizar esperamos contar con un estudio o desarrollo de un estudio académico que nos permita recoger las principales discusiones y posibles soluciones identificadas en esta discusión. Hoy iniciamos el módulo número 1, Tech for Good, innovación y estrategia para el sector humanitario.
Look, technology in the humanitarian sector is a very, in some ways, divisive conversation. Traditionally, as humanitarians, the way that we do our work is always face-to-face. The piece that I want to really talk about is the implementation of technology and how scared many people are of utilizing the current tools that are available to us, and even some of the past tools, some of the archaic tools that have been available to us for the last 10 years and still aren't being used because of fear. And how can we overcome that fear? And how can we overcome that fear, though, knowledgeably, understanding better how technology can assist us and how it can assist those that we work with? So I'll leave you with 3 little things. Number 1, do your best to accelerate innovation. And it's just by thinking and talking. I'm not asking you to do anything with people in the field. I'm not asking you to do anything to implement a mobile solution. I'm just asking you to talk about it and figure it out and bring people in the room like we're here today so that you can learn more, share more, and start to really change the way that we deliver assistance in humanitarian action. The next piece is, we need to understand that as more data is collected, we are more accountable. Right now, we live in a very easy world, right? Where it's really hard to tell if what we're doing is the right thing or not, because it's in Excel, it's in somebody else's computer. It's not in a data warehouse. It doesn't have a comprehensive database that's assessing what's going on. We can kind of hide, but we need to understand that as data is collected and stored and analyzed over time and in the future, we will all be held much more accountable to the services that we're giving. So we need to think about that and think about how that accountability and transparency is going to impact the way that you work.
Technology is transforming the entire humanitarian ecosystem, right? From the crisis we face to the way we understand it and how we respond to it. Technology is not neutral. So whether it helps or harm depends on who controls it, how it's governed, and who gets to participate. And the diffusion of innovations in the humanitarian context is opportunistic, political, and non-linear. So how do we create a system that provides trust, is trusted both by the implementer, but also by the receiver? How do we provide agency to everyone, and looking at both the people, the organizations, the tools and the interventions, the resources and the finances, right? And how does AI interject in all of this? I don't think we have a really good handle yet on AI system inventory, and I think we need to do that in our space. Understanding and mapping out all of the AI model will be really important for us. The second is to make sure that we're just not in the loop, but that we're on the loop, taking a word from one of our colleagues, and build agency. So we really need to educate everyone, not only just the affected community, but just everyone in that whole system on what AI is able to do and what it cannot do, and what are some protective measures. So educations and capacity building is going to be really key. Evaluating and testing, so validating the AI models with real world data sets is going to be really important. Transparency and accountability is also going to, so we need to have the audits, updates, enabling continuous improvement and public scrutiny. Life cycle monitoring is going to be really important, and then paying attention and assess bias regularly.
So what does that mean about hype? What it means is that in general, every context, every office, every country has a different set of requirements, potentially. There's obviously, and as Van rightly pointed out, there's a whole global narrative, which is fantastic. The use cases she mentions, I listened to her mention those. I've heard some of those being used in the Red Cross. And frankly, since 2010, before even UN Global Post started, some of those use cases have been worked on in the humanitarian space. And the same barriers, it seems to me that with research and a lot more ecosystem approaches locally and globally, that we can start to really rethink how we approach some of these things, especially with changes. I keep seeing the stuff about the digital public goods, and I think that's the most amazing thing in the world. And I know some of you probably have added products or services there or have used some things, but the idea of us building on each other's work is a necessity. It's not a nice to have anymore. And I think this is part of the challenges for Gen AI, just Gen AI. If we just focus on Gen AI for a second, what is that going to mean for the humanitarian of the future if these young people are changing it? I don't feel like we have quite a big handle on how volunteers are using it. We have all these little vignettes, these little stories, but I think what we really need is a full analysis on how it might change volunteering and humanitarian work by the local communities.
I'll make it short. For me, it's the ability for organizations to identify problems together with the community. We tend to be very good at identifying problems that we can see with our own eyes at the initial onset of things, which in many cases is important to do, but very rarely do we right-size those with the communities. Our needs assessments are standardized across emergencies around the world to create, to be able to collect KPIs, etc. And they're not really tailored to the people that we're trying to serve and really understand the nuance of their needs. It kind of goes back to that NFI discussion I was talking about earlier, around bringing in non-food items that are standardized across organizations, across geographies, in any emergency around the world bucket. In Kenya, it's the same bucket. In Myanmar, it's the same bucket. In Colombia. And so how do we ensure that we're ground truthing on the needs assessments and ground truthing our responses with the individual steps?
Great, thank you, Chris. Paul, would you like to comment on this question?
Yeah, I actually was thinking along the same lines, Chris, but I really think that this participatory design is really good. This kind of what they call a human center, but also really has to be really context driven, right? Solutions. I think I can't stress enough right now. We've done so much. And I'm really afraid that when I see my colleagues moving AI to generate proposals. And so those proposals based on those global frames. And so there has to be a way that where we can feed in the context data and then ask them, we can use it. And I think it will make great efficiency, but we just need to dump all of the context data and then also stress test that with the local community, invite them in.
I'm looking, struck by the sense that the community knows. The community knows, and so much of our time and effort is spent trying to understand what the community already knows. How do you do that?
Yeah, I think 100% the community knows. I'm going to answer this really and building a little bit on what Chris said about discoverability, right? And not only should you design with communities, we should design with each other, right? This is why I'm so passionate about digital public goods. And I think I love what UKIH and Grand Challenges Canada and Innovation Norway is doing. They're trying to collaborate to decide what's already been done that people could go and build on, right? And so if you're starting from somewhere, that's great. That's one. So the discoverability of like what's already exists that we can build on is great. But the most important thing about that discoverability thing is that who am I to say what's going to be happening in one community, as Chris pointed out, which is why I think we need to better understand how we, and I really love the program that my colleague Henry is leading, that is literally micro funding volunteers and innovators in their local community to figure out what the innovation that they want to work on is and go through the innovation method. So not only we have to discover the problem set has to be as close as possible to the local communities, but we also need to be able to build on each other's work. So it's kind of a two-way piece, right? Because who knows what's discovered and what's created in a local community, how the rest of the world could learn from that. That power dynamic has to flip. Like the idea that something's created in North America and therefore trickles down. No, I really want to see Colombian innovation, to use this example, of how it's going to change how we do our work. And they have some on our YouTube channel.
Queremos agradecer profundamente a quienes han hecho posible este espacio, en especial a Queen's University y su equipo, a Bajo, cuyo compromiso de ambos equipos con la innovación responsable y el fortalecimiento del sector humanitario ha sido clave para la realización de este evento.